Hey skaters, Nate from eSkate Hub here, and today we're going to be taking a look at the latest electric skateboard from Raldey, the Mt-V3. In this review, I'll take you through all the hardware specs, do a range and top speed tests, and show you what the braking, acceleration, and hill climbing power is like. All of my reviews are test focused, and I show you the facts so that you can make an informed decision on which electric skateboard is best for you. There is a lot to cover in this video, so if I do happen to miss something, shoot me a question down in the comments below and I will get you the answer. I'll quickly point out that this is not a sponsored video, but full disclosure, Raldey did send me the electric skateboard for free. However, I never let that become a bias in my reviews. Remember, they're all test focused and the numbers don't lie. I have a lot of electric skateboard reviews coming up over the next couple of months from the likes of Backfired Boards, X-Way, Team G, Enclosure, and I've also got some awesome giveaways lined up from wheels to e-boards, so that's all very exciting. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell so that you do not miss a thing. Alright, let's get started. It's the usual suspects in the box. You of course get the Raldey Mt-V3 electric skateboard, the remote, the board charger, a micro USB cable for charging the remote, a T-tool, and an extra Allen key that's used for opening up the motor cans. As remotes go, this one sits around the middle of the pack in regards to features and build quality. It has a glossy black plastic finish, which is fine in the naked hand, but once you put some gloves on, it becomes really slippery. It has a great LED screen that shows a bunch of useful info like your current speed, your trip distance, a running total of your total distance, the riding modes including acceleration and for the brakes, the board direction, and the battery levels for the board and the remote. You turn the remote on by holding down this button. Then to turn the board on, you just roll the board back and forth and it will turn on and pair with the remote. Roll the thumb wheel forward to accelerate and roll the thumb wheel back to apply the brakes. You cycle through the acceleration modes with this button, and you can change the braking mode by pulling back on the thumb wheel and also pressing this button. The modes for both acceleration and braking are low, mid, high, and pro. And you can customize the pairings of these modes however you like. For example, you could have low acceleration with pro braking or high acceleration with mid braking. That's really up to how you want to ride. To put the board into reverse, just double click the power button. Now when you roll the thumb wheel forward, the board will go in the opposite direction. You also have cruise control. And the way this works is that you have to be holding the accelerator on at the speed you want and then press the power button. You can't apply cruise control if you aren't holding down the accelerator. When you're done with your ride, you turn the remote off by holding this power button. You don't have to turn the board off, it will turn itself off after 5 minutes. If you wanted to turn it off manually, you can hold this button underneath the enclosure for a couple of seconds. If you do turn it off manually, you'll still be able to use the automatic turn on feature when you roll the wheels. The deck is made of 8 layers of Canadian maple, which is generally really stiff. However, the slight drop down style gives the board a tiny amount of bounce, making the ride a lot more comfortable than if it was completely stiff and a flat deck. It also locks you in and prevents your feet from slipping out and away from you while you're riding. This means you can spend more time looking at where you're going rather than down at your feet, making sure you're not about to slide off the board. The deck is 38.5 inches or 98 centimeters long and 9.5 inches or 24 centimeters at the widest part, which is where you'll be placing your feet. The grip tape on top is fairly coarse, although it is starting to wear down slightly after a few rides. They're not real hexagonal pieces, they're just printed straight onto the grip tape, and there's something about the symmetry of the hexagons that just doesn't quite sit right. I can tell it's not straight because if you follow this line, it starts on the right hand side of the truck bolts, but by the other end of the board, that line is closer to the left side of the truck bolts. But whatever, that is just an aesthetic thing. It does not affect the performance of the board at all. Raldey has used some locking nuts to fix the enclosure to the deck, and they protrude at the top above the grip tape. You can't actually see these in the images on their website, so maybe Raldey is planning to cover them with the grip tape in the future, but either way, they only stick out a few millimeters and you really cannot feel them while you're riding. The enclosure is made of a black plastic, and mine actually has this carbon fiber looking coating, which is a really nice touch. It doesn't have this on the boards in the images on their website, so I do hope they continue to ship them like this because I think it makes it look a whole lot less plasticky. The power button is on the ground facing side of the enclosure, but you rarely ever have to touch it because you can turn the e-board on just by rolling it back and forth. The charging port is on the side of the enclosure facing the back wheels, and it can be a little tricky to get to if you've got big hands. Lastly, there's this weird weird plug that opens up to an empty hole straight into the enclosure. I'm not entirely sure why it's there, possibly because they were originally planning to have the power button there and then decided to move it after the enclosures were printed. It doesn't really matter, that plug is snug and it's not going to fall out. My only concern is that the Raldey Mt-V3 has a waterproof rating of IP55, which means it's protected from any dust that could be harmful to the normal operation of the product, and it is protected from water jets projected by a small nozzle from any direction. That's pretty risky to say that it can take direct water with a removable plug like that. So hit me up in the comments if you want me to actually test how waterproof this board is. I don't really want to do it because I kind of like this board in certain situations, but if enough people want me to do it, then I'll just suck it up and do it. Let's jump to why I think most people are going to be interested in this board in the first place, and that's the wheels. There's been a massive surge in the number of eSkate brands that are either making boards with these big urban terrain wheels or are partnering with Cloud Wheels to offer more options. Raldey decided to go with their own 110mm airless rubber urban terrain wheels. They're fantastic for riding on poor quality roads, very shortcut grass and compact gravel trails, but they struggle a lot in longer grass and loose dirt. That's where you would ideally want some bigger AT wheels like you see on the Evolve boards. The trucks are 9 inches long with a 45-degree angle. This angle, combined with the soft bushings, gives the Raldey Mt-V3 a really tight turning circle. Plus, if you need to, you can easily cut corners of paved tracks thanks to the big urban wheels. When I received the Mt-V3, the trucks were really loose. So much so that I was not confident at riding around at even a cruising speed, because the trucks were so touchy that even the slightest lean resulted in a large movement in the trucks. Experienced riders would eat this up and love the agile carvability, but I'd recommend really tightening up those trucks before going out for your ride, and then loosening them off bit by bit as you start to get more and more comfortable with the board. Because to be honest, the Raldey Mt-V3 is not really for experienced e-skaters. The Raldey Mt-V3 has two 900-watt hub motors, which they claim is the largest rated power single hub motor in the industry at the moment. But don't let that fool you, it's not crazy fast, it's just a good old regular kind of fast. The top speed I managed to hit was 24.8 miles per hour, which is 40 kilometers an hour. But take a look at this graph. On my way back to where I started, I only hit just over 18 miles per hour, which is 30 kilometers an hour. I didn't initially realize it by just looking at the stretch of road, but there was a 2-meter elevation across the distance of 800 meters. And I noticed that there was an ever so slight headwind on the way back, which was hardly enough to notice, but I was looking for it. That just goes to show how much external factors can play on the performance of any electric skateboard. Okay, let's jump over and watch the hill climb real quick. So this is the hill test. I'm in pro mode. Let's see how the Raldey Mt-V3 goes. It's just cruising. 10, 11 miles an hour. It's literally just the beginning of the hill. Starting to pick up steepness and it's starting to slow down a lot. I'm just gonna pause it right there and let's check out what the incline is on this. 20.7%, and I couldn't quite get there. I'd say the Raldey is probably good for about 10 to 15%. That's about it. The Mt-V3 has a 252 watt-hour Sanyo battery, so you can't travel with this on a plane. You can get yourself extra batteries on the Raldey website to swap them in and out, but it does take quite a bit of effort to swap them over. It takes about 5 minutes to get the enclosure off, then another 5 to put it back on. Plus, the original battery will have some adhesive on the underside to secure it to the enclosure. I took the Raldey Mt-V3 out for 2 range tests just to be sure of the distance, and also because something happened at the end of the first ride that I had to test again on the second ride. But I'll get to that in a sec. I weigh 83 kilos, the road was very up and down, and I rode it pretty hard. On my first ride, I managed a distance of 10.4 miles, which is 16.7 kilometers. And on my second attempt, I got 9.7 miles, which is 15.7 kilometers. The only difference between the first ride and the second ride was that in the first ride, I rode halfway in high mode, then I got bored and I shot it up to pro mode. In the second ride, I rode entirely in pro mode. Raldey's website states a max range of 12 miles or 19 kilometers, and I think under very certain conditions where the board isn't stressed so much from climbing so many hills and you ride at a lower, more like a cruising speed, you could get close to that number. But don't buy this e-board expecting to get 12 miles out of it. Unfortunately, in 99% of cases, the range stated on the manufacturer's website is going to be very overstated. This isn't specific to Raldey, they all do it. Now I want to talk about the ESC and the events that happened at the end of both my first and my second ride. I'll just say that the Raldey Mt-V3 is a great board for about 95% of the time. Once you start nearing the end of your ride, you start to lose a significant amount of power. For me, that was only a short time after the board's battery level indicator hit 1 bar. There's 4 bars on that battery level indicator, so theoretically it could be anywhere between 25% and 0%. So once you do get down to 1 bar, it's best you start trying to find your way to the nearest charging station. Not only does the board lose power, you also start to see some voltage sag. This only happens when you start to put the motors under stress, like climbing up hills or riding on grass. The board will just completely cut out and you won't have access to accelerator or the brakes. Vintage Evolve riders will know all too well what I'm talking about here. It's not until you come to a complete stop where the board and the remote seem to reset and repair so you can get going straight away again, but it's not very long before you'll start having disconnects if you're putting it under more stress. This happened to me about 5 or 6 times in the space of 10 to 15 minutes, so that's where I called it quits on the range test. It really is a shame that this happens at the end of the ride because the rest of the ride is actually quite enjoyable. While we're still here talking about the ESC, let's take a quick look at the throttle. I think the best way to describe it would be very smooth. Maybe even too smooth in some cases. There's absolutely zero jerk when applying the accelerator or brakes. Because of the massive wheels, the Mt-V3 is slow off the mark, especially when on an off-road type of surface like loose gravel or grass. And the same goes for its braking capability. You can see in this footage just how long it takes to brake. I come in on the right-hand side of the screen at a pace of around 20 miles per hour or 32 kilometers an hour and apply the brakes here, and you can see how long it takes for me to come to a complete stop. If you're looking for absolute speed and power, then this e-board is probably not for you. But where the Raldey Mt-V3 does shine is in its comfort. The huge urban terrain wheels soak up vibrations and ride over the majority of bumps and cracks you're going to face on your ride, making this a fantastic commuter e-board. I also wouldn't be shy about taking this thing out on weekends to rip up some hard, compact off-road trails or beachside boardwalks. The Raldey Mt-V3 is $599 US, or you can even opt for the Raldey Mt-V3S, which is the exact same board but with a bigger 504 watt-hour battery, which could potentially get you up to a 20 mile or 32 kilometer range. Thank you so much for tuning in, eSkaters. I had an absolute blast reviewing the Raldey Mt-V3 electric skateboard. If I've happened to miss something, drop a question in the comments. I really do my best to get back to everybody with an answer. You can support this channel by liking, subscribing, sharing on social media. It really does make a huge difference. Lastly, if I have helped you make the decision to buy an electric skateboard, the best way you can support me is by making your purchases through the links in my description. Some companies do pay me a tiny bit of money when you do this. You don't pay any extra, and it goes a really long way in supporting this channel so that I can help new e-skaters get the best information when buying their electric skateboard. If you do use the links, thank you so much. It means the world to me. Again, thank you for watching. Ride safe out there, e-skaters, and I'll see you soon.